The Phantom Troupe versus the Royal Guards has been one of the most debated battles in Hunter x Hunter until today, because we're going to determine who the definitive winner of this battle would be. We're going to go over multiple scenarios to prove that the Phantom Troupe is the most likely victor. But first we have to set the rules of the scenarios. First of all, we're going to treat the troupe as if they're taking the place of the punitive force. So they will have the same exact information that the force did. They will know how many guards there are, the expected location of P2, about the selection in general, and the layout of the palace. They will not have the portals that Nav set up, so I think the most fair way to have them enter is via the dragon like Zeno or Netero. We know the troupe has a working relationship with the Zoldyck assassins, so the troupe hiring the family for transportation is not out of the question. It's also worth mentioning that because Zeno and Netero are not involved, P2 won't be sent away from the initial invasion, and a dragon dive will never hurt Komugi either. We also have to determine which iteration of the troupe we're going to use, as there's quite a few different ones throughout the story. This is actually a bit more complicated than it may seem. The issue is that Chrollo's abilities change with different iterations of the troupe, and his abilities in the manga are much stronger than the ones we see in Yorknu, despite the Yorknu troupe being the strongest from a pure power perspective. In case you don't know, in the manga, Chrollo develops the bookmark ability, which allows him to use two abilities at once while holding the book, or use one ability while putting the book away. This gives him way more flexibility, as we saw in the Chrollo and Hisoka fight, to the point that I think this might actually be the best option for the troupe, despite not having Uvo, Paku, or Hisoka. With all that out of the way, we can actually get into the scenarios. We're gonna start with the overall good strategies and then go into strats that might be effective against specific guards. So let's get started with the one strategy we already mentioned, which is Chrollo's strategy against Hisoka. If you read the Chrollo and Hisoka fight, it should be clear why this strategy is so powerful. By using Gallery Fake to create clones and Order Stamp to control said clones, Chrollo can create near infinite controllable entities. But he can even take it a step further by combining this with Sun and Moon, which forces bodies to explode on command. And unlike other abilities, Sun and Moon doesn't disappear when the book is closed or when the person dies. This means Chrollo can effectively create explosive puppets as long as he has bodies, and he has plenty of bodies. We already saw how effective this strategy was with a small crowd in Heaven's Arena, so imagine what it could do with the 50,000 people from the selection. Like literally all these people can explode while under Chrollo's command. I think this strat gives the troupe the best chance of winning. If the rest of the troupe can just keep the royal guards busy long enough for this strategy to go into effect, the troupe will win. There are just too many people here for the guards to effectively kill them all while defending from the Phantom Troupe. They would also have to kill them all before Chrollo turns too many of them into bombs. So not only is there pressure being exerted by the other Phantom Troupe members, there's also a huge time incentive. This strategy is great in pretty much any situation, but there are some small holes in this plan. We need to consider that Chrollo will be detected by P2's end, which could give away some general positioning, but probably won't give away the plan. It's also unlikely that P2 would go to fight Chrollo if there were 12 other strong Nen users invading the palace at the same time. Their top priority is protecting Meruem, so leaving 12 people to focus on just one would be illogical in that situation. Another issue worth mentioning is Quartopi. Chrollo needs to be able to steal his ability to pull the strategy off, so Quartopi would probably have to be left behind for his own safety. But that's probably not a huge deal because, I mean, it's Quartopi. What's he gonna do? There's also a small chance that other troupe members will get caught up in this swarm of people and die from explosions. This doesn't seem too likely though, as they would obviously be informed of the strategy beforehand, making it easier for them to adjust. All things considered, I still think this strategy gives the troupe the best chance of winning, but that's not to say it's the only way victory could be achieved. I think the next most likely victory comes from Finks. Finks has the ability Ripper Cyclotron, which basically makes his punch stronger the more time he cranks his arm. In just 10 cranks, he was able to obliterate a squadron leader. What makes this ability insane is that it doesn't have a crank cap that we know of. This means he could potentially crank his way all the way up to the strength to one-shot a royal guard. Now, this wouldn't be an easy thing to do, as the rest of the troupe would have to prevent the royal guards from killing him while he cranks up. I think this responsibility to distract the guards would fall on Nobunaga and Phaeton, because they're two of the more offensive members and their swords allow them to fight at a bit of a range, hopefully preventing too much injury. There is also the possibility that the number of cranks needed to one-shot a royal guard is just too feasibly high. If this is the case, the strategy is obviously dead on arrival. Despite this, I feel like Ripper Cyclotron is one of the best ways for the troupe to win. One-shotting a royal guard is probably the only way to kill them without repercussions, but even if it doesn't one-shot them, it could open the door to our next strategy, which is the Shizuku Suck. I probably could have phrased that better. This is basically the same strategy that Shizuku used against Pike. Someone, like Finks, would have to break the shell of one of the royal guards, and then Shizuku could suck out their blood with Blinky, leading to their eventual demise. There are two main issues with this idea. First of all, Shizuku has to survive sucking the blood out of an ant until they are completely dead. This would not be an easy task, as the royal guards are intelligent enough to understand what she is doing, and they also outspeed her by a large margin so they wouldn't have any trouble targeting her down. It would pretty much mean that the entire troop would have to defend her just to ensure the success of the attack. If Chrollo has the teleportation ability that we saw him use in York New, this might not actually be that bad, as he can just teleport away an ant if it gets too close. But if he doesn't have it, this is going to be a struggle. The other main issue is that two of the royal guards might be immune to this attack. Shiapoof and Youpi both have ways to change their anatomy. Youpi can change his body in any way that he wants via metamorphosis, which means he can easily plug any holes that are made. Shiapoof has Beelzebub, which won't directly close any holes, but because he can basically reform his body in whichever way he wants, he can probably reform it without the damage. This does open the question of whether or not Shizuku would be able to suck up the tiny poofs, and honestly I don't see any reason why she wouldn't be able to. She just has to set the tiny poofs as the condition for Blinky before it can work, so she would have to see the ability before and understand what's going on. If she can set the bug dust as a condition, this would be a super effective way to deal with Shiapoof. All she has to do is get lucky enough to swallow the real body and the rest of him will stop working. This could be one of the most guaranteed ways to defeat a royal guard, but the amount of conditions needed to pull it off makes it feel a bit worse than some of the other options. Because of these issues, I don't think this is a great strategy in order to win. So let's move on to another strategy, Black Voice. One of the most obvious ways the troop can gain an advantage over a royal guard is by controlling them directly. The easiest way to do this is with Black Voice, which gives Shalnark complete control over his victim. The main issue here is that it wouldn't be easy to land a hit with Black Voice and live. Pitou has an exoskeleton, meaning that Black Voice can only pierce at her joints. Youpi is almost impossible to touch thanks to his whips, and Shiapoof can just explode into dust if he ever feels like he's in danger. I feel like the easiest ant to control with a Black Voice would either be Pitou or Shiapoof. Not because they're easy to get to, but because Youpi would be so hard to get a hit in on and live. Getting a royal guard on the side of the troop would instantly change the battle and give the troop a huge advantage. Even if it was just Pitou, being able to put a tank between the royal guard and the rest of the Phantom Troupe would let so many other strategies develop with less pressure. On top of that, Shalnark can kill his victim once they're controlled, so it would effectively get a kill on a royal guard. A lot of you are probably wondering about Phaeton's ability and how it could be used to kill a royal guard, and to be honest, I don't know if it would be that effective. While it did decimate Zazan, we know the royal guards are far stronger than her, as Youpi walked on a scorched earth with no issues in relation to heat, so the ability might not be able to work on them, period. On top of that, the other troop members are very susceptible to the explosion, as they all had to vacate the ant castle the other time it was used. Another issue worth mentioning is how Painpacker works in the first place. Phaeton has to get hurt to make the ability stronger, and when facing the royal guards, he's far more likely to just be killed outright. I would say that Painpacker should really only be used as a last resort if all other strategies have failed, and I honestly feel the same way about Bonolanov and Jupiter. It is a huge attack that does enormous damage, but it would probably hurt other troop members as well. He also needs to dance before summoning the planet, and I doubt he would be able to fulfill that condition with 3 royal guards running around. As for the rest of the troop, I can't really see them having a way to beat the guards. Some might be able to add support, like Franklin, who could add a cover from a distance to cause chaos, and Kaluto, who could probably do recon if he gets a piece of paper on the guards, which could help the troop with information. Machi could also provide some healing as well, but I don't think it would be that helpful because her abilities for healing take a while to heal major wounds. They're not as slow as Dr. Blythe, but it did take a while just to heal Hisoka. There is also the possibility for her to control some of the other Chimera ants around the castle, but we don't know exactly how good her threads are for manipulation, as the only time we saw them was when they were used against the Mafia, who were doing some pretty simple movements. She could maybe also set up some tiny tripwires with her threads, as they do get stronger the shorter they are. These probably wouldn't do anything major, but maybe tripping a guard could be helpful in some capacity, but honestly, I doubt there's anything Machi could do that would really help the troop. There is one last thing I want to mention, and that is lose conditions for the troop. These are conditions that will pretty much guarantee a loss for the Phantom Troupe against the Royal Guards, and to be honest, there aren't a lot of them. Obviously, if they all get killed, they lose, because, well, you know, they're dead. But only a few members actually have to die for the troop to be put into a super disadvantageous position. If the people that we talked about today die, then it's definitely over for them. Without Finks, Shalnark, or Shizuku, their odds drop drastically. And then there is of course the case of Chrollo dying, where just his death would lead to the entire troop falling apart. It's mentioned a few times throughout the show that Chrollo is the only way that the troop can exist and function. So if he dies, the troop collapses. He is the voice of reason within the troop and the one that creates order. If he dies, new leaders will try to assume themselves, and it will create too much chaos within the troop for them to move in a way that is not self-destructive, which will lead to their inevitable demise. So who wins between the Royal Guards and the Phantom Troupe? Well, I'd say it goes to the troop. They have multiple methods of beating the Royal Guards, and even a few strategies that would be effective on all of them. Obviously, it would not be an easy win in any capacity, and it would probably push the troop to their brink, costing them at least a couple of members. But a victory is a victory regardless how gruesome it is. I would give it to the Phantom Troupe in 60-40 odds. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to subscribe. It's one of the best ways to support this channel other than watching another video or direct monetary support via a membership, but no pressure on that. Thank you so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next week for another video.